A veteran actor ignored Clint's direction. He was gone before lunch. A film production in Nevada had assembled one of the most experienced casts in recent Hollywood history when things began unraveling on the third day of shooting. Martin Calloway, a veteran actor with 30 years of credits and a reputation for being difficult but brilliant, decided that his interpretation of a key scene was superior to what the director wanted. When Clint Eastwood quietly asked him to try it the scripted way, Calloway laughed and said, "I've been doing this longer than you've been directing. I know what works." What happened over the next 90 minutes would end a career, transform the production, and teach every actor in Hollywood a lesson about the difference between experience and professionalism. By 11:47 a.m., Martin Calloway was in a car heading to the airport. He never worked in film again. Martin Calloway arrived on set with an entourage. 3 assistants, a personal makeup artist, a dialogue coach he hadn't needed in 20 years but kept around for comfort. His contract required a specific trailer configuration, particular catering options, and a guaranteed number of close-up shots per scene. He was 62 years old. He had been nominated for major awards. He had worked with directors whose names defined eras of filmmaking. He had built a career on intense performances that critics described as transformative and fearless. He was also known throughout the industry as one of the most difficult actors to work with. Stories circulated about his behavior on previous productions, shouting matches with directors, demands that scenes be rewritten on the day of shooting, refusals to follow blocking that he considered beneath his artistic vision. Studios tolerated this behavior because his performances delivered. Audiences paid to see Martin Calloway lose himself in a character. They didn't know or care about what happened behind the scenes. Directors knew, crew members knew, and now Clint Eastwood was about to learn firsthand. The production had begun smoothly. Clint ran his sets the way he always had, efficiently, professionally, with minimal drama. He expected actors to know their lines. He expected crew members to be prepared. He didn't waste time on excessive takes or lengthy discussions about motivation. Martin Calloway found this approach unsettling. He was accustomed to directors who negotiated with him, who solicited his input extensively, who treated his presence on set as a collaboration between equals rather than a hierarchical relationship. On the first day, he tested the waters. "I'd like to discuss the blocking for scene 12, he told Clint during a break. "What about it?" "I think my character would enter from the left rather than the right. It creates a stronger visual dynamic." Clint considered this for a moment. "The right entrance works better for the camera setup. Let's stay with the plan." "But my instinct." "Your instinct is noted. We're staying with the plan." Calloway's expression tightened, but he complied. The first day ended without incident. The second day brought more friction. Calloway requested changes to his dialogue, minor adjustments that he felt would make the lines more natural for his delivery. Clint listened to the suggestions and declined most of them. "The script works as written. Let's shoot it. I'm just trying to make it better." "The script is good. Your performance will make it better. That's your job." Calloway bristled at the response. He was not accustomed to directors who didn't defer to his experience. He was not accustomed to being told that his job was to serve the material rather than reshape it. By the end of the second day, a tension had developed that everyone on set could feel. The crew exchanged glances when Calloway made requests. The other actors watched the dynamic with professional interest, noting how Clint responded to each challenge. The production assistant kept notes about timing and efficiency. Day 2 was completed on schedule, but the atmosphere had shifted. Something was building. Day 3 began at 6 a.m. The first scene scheduled was a confrontation between Calloway's character and another major figure in the story. It was emotionally intense, dramatically important, and required precise execution to convey the conflicting motivations at play. Clint reviewed the setup with his cinematographer. The blocking was established. The camera positions were marked. The lighting was prepared. Calloway arrived on set at 7:30, 30 minutes late, but within the window his contract allowed. "Good morning, Martin. We're ready for the first setup when you are. I've been thinking about this scene. And I want to approach it differently than what's scripted." "Differently how?" "My character wouldn't say these lines this way. The anger is too direct. I think it should be more subdued, simmering rather than explosive. The scene requires explosive. That's the dramatic function. But my interpretation, your interpretation is valuable. Apply it within the framework of what's scripted." Calloway agreed to try the scene as written. Action. He delivered the lines with energy, with precision, with the skill that had made him famous. But something was off. A subtle resistance in his performance, a holding back that undermined the emotional impact the scene required. Cut. Clint walked to where Calloway stood. That was technically correct, but you're not committed. I need you fully in this moment. I told you, the approach feels wrong to me. And I told you, the approach serves the story. Your job is to make it work. My job is to create an authentic performance. Your job is to collaborate with the director to create the film we're making together. Try it again. Full commitment. Action. Calloway's performance was identical to the first take. The same technical proficiency, the same subtle resistance, the same holding back that drained the scene of its power. Cut. Clint's expression remained neutral. Martin, I need more energy. The character is at a breaking point. Show me that. I don't think the character would break at this moment. I think he would internalize. The script says he breaks. The story requires him to break. Give me the break. I can't give you something I don't believe in. Then believe in it. That's what acting is. The crew had stopped moving. Everyone on set understood that this moment was significant. A collision between two different understandings of how films were made. Calloway stepped out of his mark. Let me explain something, he said, his voice rising. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've worked with directors whose names you learned in film school. I know how to create a performance that resonates with audiences. I'm not questioning your experience. You're ignoring it. You're asking me to do something that contradicts my instincts, my training, everything I understand about this character. I'm asking you to trust the material and trust my direction. That's what actors do. That's what inexperienced actors do. Actors at my level contribute to the creative vision. Actors at every level take direction. That's the job. Not my job, not anymore. Clint was quiet for a moment. Martin, I'm going to give you one more chance to do this scene the way it's written. After that, we'll need to have a different conversation. Calloway returned to his mark. His face showed the anger he felt, not the character's anger, but his own. The humiliation of being corrected publicly. The frustration of working with a director who wouldn't accommodate his approach. Action. He delivered the lines. The performance was wrong in a new way. Too much energy now. The anger genuine but misdirected. He wasn't playing the character. He was expressing his own resentment. Cut. Clint walked to Calloway once more. That's not what I asked for. That's what you're getting. Then we have a problem. The only problem here is a director who doesn't understand how to work with talented actors. Clint stepped back from Calloway. He looked around the set at the crew members who had frozen in place, at the other actors who watched with varying expressions of concern and curiosity, at the production assistants who had stopped writing. Everyone take 10, he said. The set cleared. Clint and Calloway stood alone in the space where the scene had been blocked. Let me be clear about what's happening, Clint said quietly. You're refusing to take direction. That's a breach of your professional obligations. I'm refusing to give a bad performance. That's artistic integrity. It's your job to give the performance I'm asking for. If you can't do that, you can't work on this film. Are you threatening to fire me? I'm explaining the situation. You decide what happens next. Calloway laughed. Fire me. I'm the reason half the financing came through. My name is in the marketing materials. You can't fire me 3 days into production. I can fire anyone who won't do the work. The studio won't allow it. The studio trusts my judgment. That's why I'm directing this film. You're bluffing. I don't bluff. I also don't repeat myself. You have one more take to deliver what I'm asking for. If you can't or won't, we're done. Calloway's expression shifted, still angry, but something else now, the beginning of uncertainty. He had assumed his reputation would protect him, his experience, his value to the production. Looking at Clint's face, he began to realize he might have miscalculated. The crew returned to their positions. The set reassembled around Calloway, who stood at his mark with an expression that combined defiance and doubt. Action. He delivered the lines. The performance was marginally better. He was trying now, at least partially. But the commitment Clint had asked for still wasn't there. The holding back remained, the resistance to fully serving the material. Cut. Clint walked to Calloway one final time. That was closer. But it's still not what I need. I gave you everything I have. No, you didn't. You gave me what you decided to give. Those are different things. That's all you're going to get. Clint nodded slowly. Then, we're done. You're off the film. Calloway stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Someone will drive you to the airport. Your per diem through today will be honored. Beyond that, I'd suggest you contact your agent about next steps. The studio has been informed. They support my decision. When? While we were talking, I made a call during the break. You called the studio to fire me while we were in the middle of a conversation? I called to confirm what I already knew, that I have the authority to remove anyone who isn't contributing to this production. You weren't contributing. Now you're leaving. Calloway's face went pale. This will destroy you. Everyone in the industry will know what you did. What I did was maintain professional standards on my set. Everyone in the industry will know that too. A production assistant appeared at Calloway's side. Mr. Calloway, there's a car waiting to take you to your trailer. You can collect your personal items and I know the procedure. Calloway looked around the set one final time. The crew members who had worked with him for 3 days watched without sympathy. They had seen his behavior. They had witnessed his refusal to take direction. They understood why this was happening. The other actors, professionals who had worked with Clint before, who understood how his sets operated, also watched. Some of them had been concerned about working with Calloway, knowing his reputation. Now that concern had been validated and resolved. "This isn't over," Calloway said to Clint. "It is for you, on this production." Calloway walked off the set. The time was 11:47 a.m. The set was quiet for a moment after Calloway's departure. Clint turned to his assistant director. "Call the casting office. We need someone to step into the role, someone who can be here tomorrow." "Already working on it. And let's use the rest of today to shoot scenes that don't include that character. We have coverage to get." The production shifted immediately. Scenes were reorganized. Actors were notified of schedule changes. The machinery of filmmaking continued despite the disruption. By 1 p.m., cameras were rolling again. By the end of the day, the production was back on schedule. The crisis that should have derailed the film had been resolved in under 2 hours. The replacement actor arrived the following morning. His name was David Chen, a character actor with extensive television experience and several supporting film roles. He was not as famous as Martin Calloway. He was not as experienced. He did not have the reputation or the credits, but he had something that Calloway didn't have. He took direction. Clint explained the scene that had caused the conflict, the confrontation, the emotional explosion, the dramatic requirements. "I understand," David said. "Where do you want me?" They shot the scene in 2 takes. Both takes were excellent. David Chen's performance in the finished film was powerful. He brought everything the role required, the emotional range, the complexity, the presence that the story demanded. Critics would later praise his work, noting that he had exceeded expectations in a role that could have overwhelmed a less skilled actor. What they didn't know, what audiences never knew, was that the role had originally belonged to someone else, that someone else's name would gradually disappear from industry conversations. Martin Calloway, who had been fired before lunch on his 3rd day of production, found that studios were reluctant to hire someone who had been removed from a Clint Eastwood set. The word had spread, not through gossip, but through professional networks. He won't take direction. He puts his interpretation above the production. He's not worth the risk. The story became a teaching tool. Casting directors told young actors about what had happened, not as a threat but as a lesson about professional expectations. Your job is to serve the material and take direction. Your interpretation is valuable, but it has to exist within the framework the director establishes. What if I disagree with the direction? You can discuss it. You can advocate for your approach. But ultimately, you take direction. That's what actor means. What if I'm right and the director is wrong? Then you do what you're asked, and you hope the director recognizes the mistake in editing. Your job isn't to make creative decisions. Your job is to perform. That seems limiting. It's the opposite. It's freeing. You focus on performance and trust that the director is handling everything else. Years later, Clint was asked about the incident. "I remember the situation," he said. "I don't talk about specific individuals. Generally then, how do you handle actors who disagree with your direction?" "I listen. I consider their input. Sometimes they have good ideas that improve the scene. I'm not closed to collaboration. And when the collaboration breaks down, then I make a decision. The director has to maintain authority over the creative vision. If an actor can't or won't participate in that vision, they're in the wrong job." Isn't that harsh? It's honest. Film production is expensive. Time is limited. Everyone on set depends on the work getting done. One person who refuses to contribute puts everyone else at risk. So there's no room for artistic disagreement? There's room for disagreement. There's no room for refusal to work. Martin Calloway's career ended not with a public scandal, but with a quiet disappearance. Studios stopped calling, agents stopped submitting him for roles. The opportunities that had seemed endless dried up completely. He attempted a comeback several times. Theater work, independent films, any project that would have him, but the reputation followed him. Difficult was one thing. Many successful actors were difficult, and their talent compensated for the challenges they created. Unprofessional was something else entirely. Word that an actor had been fired from a Clint Eastwood production for refusing to take direction was not something that could be overcome through talent alone. Calloway eventually retired, his career having ended decades earlier than he had expected. He gave occasional interviews where he maintained that he had been mistreated, that his artistic integrity had been violated, that the industry had blacklisted him unfairly. Few people believed him. The people who had been on set that day knew what had actually happened. A veteran actor ignored Clint's direction. He was gone before lunch. The story illustrates something fundamental about professional collaboration. Experience is valuable. Instincts developed over decades of work matter. Actors bring interpretations that directors should consider and sometimes accept. But there's a line. On one side of the line is contribution, offering your skills and ideas in service of the shared project. On the other side is obstruction, prioritizing your own preferences over the director's vision and the production's needs. Martin Calloway crossed that line. He believed his experience entitled him to override direction. He believed his reputation protected him from consequences. He believed that being difficult but brilliant was sustainable indefinitely. He was wrong on all counts. Clint Eastwood demonstrated what happened when someone crossed the line. Not through anger or drama, but through professional action. The problem was identified, addressed, and resolved in under 2 hours. The production continued. The film was completed, and the lesson spread through Hollywood. Experience doesn't entitle you to ignore direction. Reputation doesn't protect you from consequences. Professionalism isn't optional, not for anyone, regardless of how many credits they have. A veteran actor ignored Clint's direction. He was gone before lunch, and everyone who heard the story understood exactly why.